Alright, so now we're going to do our final animation. And so what I have here is I have this clip from the movie The Jerk with Steve Martin. And once it opens,
Damn, these glasses. Your opinion.
so it's about
Looks good
here.
to me, sir, but I'd like your opinion. Damn these glasses. Well, it looks good to me, too. Hurry up, son. Time's wasted. I'm going to the John. Don't forget to check those tires. Damn these glasses, son. Yes, sir. I damn thee.
It's a funny scene. It's got some action in it. It's got some camera cuts. It has two people in there, and they're both kind of interacting with each other. Okay, so I think it's a nice clip. There's a couple other clips here that I have. This one is a nice clip and it's funny, but they're really not doing a whole lot. There's not a lot of movement in each of these people. It'd be very boring to see this type of animation brought into a 3D medium. Okay. Same thing with this one here would be very good, but it's only Steve Martin who's very animated. And oops, shrink that. And he has a lot of facial characteristics that would really lend to creating a very cool facial character animation type scene, as opposed to doing like a full on body scene. But you can see his facial expressions are very cool. And I got some other ones here. Okay. I also downloaded a car model because in mine there was a car model, so I want to make sure I grab that. So I'm just going to take this and drag it into After Effects into a new project. So I want to do a little bit of processing on it before I do anything else. I'm going to take note of this right here where it says that it's 24 essentially frames per second and the audio is 44 1000 or 100. So I'm going to take my comp and drop it onto the new comp, or take my footage and drop it on the new comp. That way I get the piece of footage here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my slider all the way back until I get to my starting point. Okay, and if I need to, I can zoom in here and just drag, drag, drag. Oops, right about there is my starting point. Okay, I should go right there. Okay, so there's my starting point. Now I'm going to drag this little yellow thing to the end of my time slider, and you want to get it even a little bit past what you need. That way, in case you decide you want to expand on it, you don't have to come back in After Effects. So I'm going to go to about here, and I'm just going to bring in my work area and just drag this in holding shift. And I'm going to go up to composition and say trim comp to work area. So now I have roughly 30 seconds or so of footage. You only need about 10 to 15 seconds of good action. So if you look within this first 10 seconds, or even 15 seconds, is probably where I'm actually going to cut this off. Okay, because that's kind of like the punchline of the scene, so I'm just going to stop it there. All right, but I have this other stuff I want to add anything else in there to kind of complete the scene, but I don't really think it's necessary. All right, so now I'm going to export this out, but first what I want to do before I export it is it would be nice if After Effects hotkeys work. There we go. It'd be nice if I had a frame number over here in the corner. That way I could see exactly what frame I'm on. So I'm going to click on my footage, I'm going to go to Effect, I'm going to go to Text, and I'm going to go to Time Code. And with this, we get a little thing here I can move around. So I'm just going to move this to the corner so it's out of the way of my characters. I'm going to take my text size up. And you can see right now I have time code. So this is basically telling me I'm at 27 seconds, 22 frames for this piece of footage. Okay, so I want to do not the layer source, but the composition. So now I'm at 0, 0, so it matches this 0, 0. Okay, but I don't even want to do that. I just want to see frames. So I come up to the display format, I change it to frames. So now as I use my page up and page down, I'm cycling through all those frames, and I can see each frame number on there. That's what I want to happen. Okay, I can turn the box off or turn it on, whatever, it doesn't matter. That should be good. I'm going to turn the box off just because I really don't need it. Okay. Then I'm going to go up to Composition and say Add to Render Queue. And I'm going to go click on Lossless, and I'm going to make this a QuickTime. And I'm going to change the format to H.264. Make sure that these are all set up the way they have. No checks here. This is at 100. And I'm going to resize this. I don't need it at 1280. Okay, so I'm going to resize it to 640 by 360, which is half of those numbers. I also don't need audio with this. This is just my preview that I'm going to use for timing, so I don't need audio. So I'm going to say output 2. It's going to go into my video folder. I'm going to say the jerk OptiGrab. Okay, now I'm not going to hit render yet because I also want to export the audio that I can bring into Maya. So I'm going to go up to Composition. I'm going to say Add Output Module. And under Lossless, I'm going to change this from AVI to Wave. Now sometimes MP3s will come into Maya, but I've had hit or miss success with that. So I'm going to go to Wave. And here's where we want to remember that we had 44.1. That was what our audio was brought in at. So we never want to export it out higher than our lowest bandwidth, okay, our lowest sample rate. So I'm going to take this down to 22, okay, which is half of 44.1. That way it'll be a little bit smaller. I can also change it from stereo to mono and hit OK. And change this to the jerk OptiGrab audio. Now we'll hit render, and now we'll wait. Okay, so my After Effects project finished. I saved my After Effects project into my movies folder of my project. Here's my Andy Animation project folder that I created within Maya. And inside the movies, here's my clipped movie I have. Here is my OptiGrab. I don't need this one here clipped. It's an old one. That's an old one. This OptiGrab movie here is the actual movie that rendered out of After Effects. Then in my sound folder, I have the actual audio file that we're going to use. Okay, and in my source images, I have all the textures for the Andy rig that I need, as well as the car ones that I have. And in scenes, I have the Andy rig with the character set up, and then I have the car model pieces as well. Excuse me. Okay, so now I'm going to open up Maya 2013 because I'm using the Andy rig. So like we talked about, sometimes the Andy rig has issues in 2014 for some odd reason. So I'm just going to use 2013 for the process. Everything else is going to be exactly the same. So I'm going to go to File and Import. And I'm going to go into my sound folder. There it is. And I'm going to grab that audio file. And see, it's only 1.5 MB, so it's not terribly too big. If this was anything bigger, like 10 megabytes or 20 megabytes, this would really slow Maya down, but that's not going to. So as I import it, you'll see down here in the timeline, I get that little waveform. It might be a little hard to see in the video, but there's a little waveform in here, a little green line. So if I hit play,
Looks good.
you can hear that it's playing and it's kind of cutting off. So I know this is about 850 or so frames is how long this is. So as I hit play now,
Looks good to me, sir, but I'd like your opinion.
I can hear everything that's happening. Now it's not by, yours may not be doing that right off the bat. If I go next to the key where they have the animation preferences, we have to make sure that our time slider is set to real time. Okay, we can't have it set to play reframe because then it won't play the audio back in real time. Okay, it'll just not play it at all. So this has to be set to real time. And my animation settings up here, are set to 24 because that's what my original source footage is. I can't set this to anything like 30 and try to match that up because then when I take it back in, it's not going to line up perfectly. Our source clip is 24. I want to use 24 for this. Okay. So time slider is set to 24, real time. I'm going to hit save. I could also change my audio. There it goes. I can change the height of this to 4, and you can see how big that is now. I can also go to the sound area, and I can display the waveform on the top, the bottom, or all. I've never used the repeat on hold, so I have no idea what that even does. Okay, but I'm happy with this thing just being at maybe 2. But for this video, I'm going to set it to 1 just so I have some more screen space. Okay, so hit save. Now I hit play.
Damn these glasses. But it looks
Okay, so I can hear it. That's what I want. So I'm going to import the Andy rig. So I'm going to go to File Import, and I'm going to go to import my Andy rig. So I go to Scenes, I go to Andy rig, and the first part of this is just setting him up right. Okay, it's just getting him into the right positions. Let's put him right on the grid. I'm trying to snap him right to the grid. There he goes. Okay, and if you look at the naming of him as he came in, it's a big long name. So I want to get rid of that big long name. So I'm going to go up to Windows, General Editor's Namespace Editor, and I'm going to remove this. So I click on that, I hit delete, and say merge with root. Click on this, delete, merge with root. And I can even highlight multiple ones and delete them, and then sometimes it won't work. There we go. Okay. And then, of course, I want to make sure everything's still working. So I can still move him here. I can still grab his the box around his hand. I can still move that. I can turn on the facial controls. The facial controls are still going to work. Okay. So I know that this is pretty good because everything is still working. But you have to be careful because sometimes when you download a rig, sometimes they won't work correctly after you've done something like that. Then you just basically ignore the naming and just say, okay, I'm just going to leave it the way it is. So I'm going to go under the outliner, window outliner, and this will be Steve Martin. So I'll call it Steve. Okay, so now when I go to my character set, you see that I have Steve. Steve had arms and legs. Okay, so that one's Steve Martin. I can change the clothing on him. I can go into Photoshop and adjust some of it. So I'm just going to do boy. I'll just do the smiley shirt for now. Okay, but I could go into Photoshop and adjust these textures and make it look nicer. All right, so I'm going to go and import the next character. Okay, import the same rig, snap it to the grid so we're on the ground. Make sure we go through the namespace editor and delete all that stuff. It's taking. Yeah, there it was. So it wasn't refreshing. Whew. All right, so there we go. So now we have nice names over here. Then we can go in the outliner, and I forget the other guy's name. We'll just call him Inventor. Okay, that way we know who the other guy is. Okay, and then this is obviously a different look to him, so we'll go with man, boy chest, and we'll go with stripes. I think this Andy has a girl chest, so let's change that back to boy chest here. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to save my scene as OptiGrab01. Okay, I'm going to import my car. All right, I thought the 32, the actual Maya file would open, but apparently not. Let me open up the OBJ. Okay, here is, if I delete some of this extra stuff here, maybe not. Nope, that extra stuff is all parented and grouped together, so I need to go to Mesh, Separate, and then I can grab this dome, grab the plane, and delete those. Grab these pieces and delete that. Do whatever this is, random piece. Okay, I'm going to assign, this is the card I downloaded, just found it online. Just going to make sure I assign my Lambert to it. Okay, it doesn't look like these pieces want to texture. Maybe if I put a different material on there, sometimes that works. Still doesn't like it. And this is one of the things that happens when you get a model from the internet. You have to play with it a little bit. So I'm going to try mesh combining it, and then normals conforming it. I can also go to mesh mirror geometry. Oops, not mirror geometry. Mesh mirror cut. And tell it that I want to mirror this over the Y and the Z direct axis. Okay, now it went the opposite way, so I just make my 90 here a negative 90, and now we're good. Okay, so that's good there. I can delete the history now. Delete this mirror plane. Then scale this up to an appropriate size. There you go. That looks good. Maybe a little bit bigger. Yeah, there you go. I think that's probably good there. Okay, that seems like it's, if I look at my movie here, and just looking at how tall they are compared to the car, you can see where his shoulder is basically coming up at the top of the car. This might even be a little bit too big still. There we go. Now in the video here, he has the hood open. Obviously, this rig, if I go inside, there's nothing here. Okay, so I'm not going to leave the hood open for it. I'm just going to let the user or the viewer use their imagination. But obviously, if this was a movie piece, I would want to have that stuff open. Okay, I could even take this and go to mesh separate again, and that's all one piece there. So I can grab the faces for this. And I could do like a cheesy little fake to it and just kind of pop the hood open. Make sure I deselect these extra faces in here so I don't extract the wrong thing. Same thing here. That should be good there. Okay. So if I took this and went to mesh extract, now I have this piece where if I just put the hinge in the right spot, and I can pop it open and just have this kind of thing happening here. And I have these little pieces here. I'm just going to parent to that. Okay, so I can do something like that just to make it look kind of, silly-ish. There we go. Okay, so now what I want to do is save my scene again as version 2 of the car. And you can put a little label on here, car import. That way you know which one it is. So now what we're going to do is the first step of this is we're going to go back to frame 0 where we're starting this thing, and we're going to position our characters into this pose. Okay. So I'm just going to bring, this is, if I scroll down, way down. Alright, let me just grab one of the pieces. One of the animated pieces, like the wrist. There we go. Alright, well this one is Steve anyway, because he's the boy. I remember that was the boy. So I'm going to grab this and just name him Steve. I'm going to click here, and then this one's going to be Inventor. That way I don't get confused. Alright, so I'm going to take Steve and bring him over here. I'm going to rotate him around. That's what these circles on the bottom are for, is your base positioning. Okay, so I'm just going to use that as reference. I'm looking at, just like when we did our poses, I'm looking at how he's positioned. Okay, so I know he's kind of bent over here, but if you look at his hips, he actually probably has, like, you can't see it, but this left leg is probably bent, and the back leg is probably straight. So I'm going to put this one here. I'm going to twist the hips a little bit. Grab that and scoot it forward some more. I'm just repositioning him to get him into that position of being inside the car. And you can see his arms and joints are getting kind of like jumbled together. I don't care about that because I'm just going to be positioning things in the exact spot that I need them. If I do that, kind of like in a sequence. Whoops, wrong stuff. Be careful when grabbing stuff. You don't grab the wrong joints. There we go. Alright, you can see that his back is kind of twisted also. It can be a little tricky to grab stuff inside here. And this elbow is actually going to be back further, so I need to take this hand and pull it back. I'm going to shrink my joints, or even just go to show joints and turn them off. I shouldn't really need them, and if I do, I can always pull them back on. And the trick to any animation is getting strong poses. Getting really nice poses in there that really define each kind of movement. Just going to pull them up a little bit more. It's not there. There. Now you can grab his hips a little bit and pull his hips up a little bit more. And of course, scoot him over because now it looks like he's looking in the hood. There we go. Alright, so that's a pretty close posture as to what we're seeing here. The spine could use a little bit more work. There we go. Okay. And I'm just going to fix his hand here because it was kind of twisted. And just nudge his elbow in a little bit more. Okay. So there's Steve Martin's character's pose here. And like I said, I want to bend this foot a little bit, so I'm just going to add a little bit of toe roll. There we go. little bit of foot roll on there. There we go. And not so much foot roll. Okay, so there he is, looking at the car, and then we're going to have the inventor guy standing to the side of him. We just rotate him around 180. And it looks like he has his hands on his hips. And the positioning of these is important. I can't have him way back here because I know that pretty soon he's going to be talking to him. You see he doesn't take like a huge step. It's literally like he's repositioning his left foot, and that looks like that's all he's doing. Okay, so I have to just bring him a lot closer to the scene. Like that. Okay, and if I realize, oh, he is too close, I can always pull him back some. Okay, so it looks like he is leaning on his left hip. It looks like his right hip is probably in the air. His right elbow is up. I'm assuming his other elbow is up too. So let's make him leaning on his left hip. So we're going to space his feet a little bit further apart. We're going to pull his hips down. And I'm just going to tilt his hips like that. So now he looks like he's leaning on that hip. Okay, and then I can go through the hips here, and I can rotate that back into place. Oops, not that one. Rotate these back into place. Because whenever you rotate your hips one way, your torso is going to go the other way because you want to stay in a straight line. Okay, so now the rest of this is just positioning him into this pose. And just like before, it's all about those strong poses. I'll take his hand too and just take the spread in a little bit. Take his thumb in. A little bit. There we go. Okay, and we want these shoulders to be kind of offset too. So I'm going to take this shoulder, raise it up. I'm going to take this shoulder and lower it down. Now this is the boring part because it's literally just doing the exact same thing we did with poses. It's just a matter of now we're kind of doing it in an animated form. Take this elbow and throw it out too. And you see how you kind of bounce around. It's not like you stay in one specific spot. You're kind of looking at it and saying, okay, what needs to be fixed? Now I'll go and do that. What needs to be fixed? I'll go and do that. Take my spread in a little bit. And sometimes it'll help too if you actually like get yourself into this pose. You'll understand like what they're doing better. Let's do thumb twist. I'll go to this side and do the same thing to the thumb. Oops. There we go. Okay, and then most likely we want a little bit of curl in the fingers. I'm just going to grab all of my fingers. Just add a little bit of curl to them, just so it looks like he's actually grabbing his waist. Alright, so now if we look at this, we're almost there. I think I need to have him be a little bit more tipsy. Something like that. And maybe even push these a little bit further over. Okay, so now I'm good. I'm going to change my character set to Steve. And oops, let me fix his hands first. I just don't like these. The default pose of them being like that big is like funky. So I'm just going to close his hand here. And take his thumb, close that a little bit too. And then take the spread, bring the spread in. Same thing with that hand. A little less spread. There we go. Okay, so now it looks like he has his hands in a more standard pose. Alright, so I'm on my Steve character set, so I'm going to hit S to set a key. Then I'm going to switch to my inventor character set and hit S to set a key. That way I set keys on both of them, and I get 178 keys set for each of them. Okay, so that way when I advance my time, oops, now the inventor didn't work. So the inventor one I lost, he like jumped back. So I'll have to just reset him real quick. Okay, so I'm back to having the pose in there, and what I believe happened is when I switch this to inventor and I hit S, it's not actually setting a key, okay, because I'm not clicked on here and then hit S. Now I've set a key, okay. So I want to make sure that I go through these and make sure that I've set my keys correctly, okay. Now one thing we're going to notice, we have a key set at once, and now when we scrub, we're good. When I go in here, you see my time range starts at 0, but in here my time range starts at 1. So it's not a huge deal, but you want to make sure that they are in sync. So what I'm going to do is go back to 0, and then I'm just going to middle drag to 0, and then reset a key for Steve, and then reset a key for inventor. Okay. So now I'm at 0. That's my first keyframe, my first frame, and so I'm good. So now what I can do is I'm going to go to my next pose, okay? I'm going to focus on, in this first camera move, Steve Martin's like the hero of the shot. So I'm going to work on this first camera move of getting him to do what he needs to do. And then I'll work on the guy after I get him set. Okay? It's going to be very difficult bouncing back and forth to get these things in the right spot. So I'm going to switch to Steve. And I'm going to see how many frames it takes for him to do his next major movement. Okay? So right now he's coming out. He's still moving, still moving, still moving. And I'm trying to see where I want the next major pose to be. And I think I want it to be right about here. Okay, right about, let's say 35. Okay, so he comes from inside here, and he swoops out to 35, and that's my next major pose. Okay, so now I'm just going to do that exact thing. Okay, but I want to look at and see where he's moving. Okay, most likely I think he's taking a step back with this foot, and then his other foot is swinging around and coming up to the side of it. Okay, and that's important because if he simply kept this foot still, then it's going to be a little bit different story as to where I move these for the next pose. Okay, if he keeps his foot still and this other foot just kind of comes around here, then I want to make sure that I don't move this foot. But because he's taking a step, I'm going to go to frame 35, and I'm going to move this foot backwards a little bit, and I'm going to move this foot back a little bit, and I'm going to ignore the fact that this is going to look funky, and I'm just positioning him where he needs to be. Okay, I'm taking him out of his circle, that's fine. Reset his rotate. Bring him around. He's in a little funny pose. Center him better. And you can actually see that his left foot is probably forward. So I'm actually going to bring this left foot forward a little bit more, which means I have to take the hips and center them. If you look at the side view, that looks funky. So I need to bring these hips forward more. Okay, and I also raised his foot before. I think I'm going to take that down now. I'm also going to take off this rotation he has on his hips. And he's definitely twisted to the side, so let's rotate like that. Okay, and you can see his shoulder here and his shoulder there are at an angle, so I also want to rotate that down. I'm going to rotate this a little bit more. Okay, so this front shoulder here is going to be down. This other shoulder is going to be up. And then we also have a little bit of spine movement in there. So I want to, I'm just going to reset some of these other things to 0 again. And I'm just going to rotate his spine or shoulders down a little bit like that. Okay, and he's obviously looking at the guy, so we'll go into his neck controls. I'll reset that. And again, this is just exactly what we did before on the posing. It's just a matter of now we're posing him at different time intervals for this kind of stuff. Okay, so his hand's going to be out further. Once I get my first stage of animation done, then it's going to be a matter of going through and putting in all these little props, and then I can tweak it further. That hand is just about in the right spot. Just have to twist it a little bit. That's where he's holding the end of this stick. Oops. Actually, his hand is facing forward. That's why we have reference. So it's like that. Just take the elbow and pull it back. And I wouldn't do any lip syncing at this point. That would be like a later step as well. Okay, think of this as like in figure class where we had like the gestures. That's what we're looking at. Okay. I think I want to round his back a little bit more. That'll mean I want to take these controls up more. A little bit of rotation. Oops. Pull them out a little bit more. This elbow is going to be lower. And I can turn off these facial controls. I don't need those on right now. Okay, so that's a good pose there. Maybe I'll just take this. Well, a little bit more movement down here, I think. I'm just going to push this. There we go. I think that's better. Alright, so now let me set another key for my Steve. So hit S. Okay, so now as I slide back, let me turn my audio off. I don't need it on right now. Okay, you can see he's coming out and kind of showing him the stick. So then I'm going to go to the next pose. Okay, and you can see all the way till about 170, let's say 170. All the way to about 170, he's still in the same pose. He wobbles back and forth a little bit, but there's not a whole lot of movement otherwise. So I'm just going to jump to 170 and set a key on him. Okay, then I can go a little bit forward. And I have to imagine, because I can't see everything, I have to imagine what's happening. Okay, looks like he's putting the stick down and kind of settling into a new pose at about 195. Okay, so at 195, I'm just going to jump up. And I'm going to assume that his settling is just kind of this foot coming back here, his hips. Oops, not going that way. Going this way and pulling back. Okay, and then his hands coming down by his sides. And I'll go through sometimes and just reset everything to zeros and then go into there, because sometimes you'll get a better pose doing that. Sometimes you just have to be careful that you don't go too far. Like if I were to have rotated his hand this far and I set a key here and then I reset it to zero and set a key, he's going to actually twist around. So you just have to be careful with it. And it becomes very apparent when you start seeing some of your animations that they start doing that stuff, and it becomes very obvious right away. So you just have to be on the lookout for it. And part of the easiness in which I'm doing this is because I remembered the stuff that I adjusted, and I can just reset those back to zero, just to get them to stand back up straight. Collarbone. And other collarbone. And just to see, we're at about this kind of angle. So we'll set another key for Steve here. Okay, so we have to make sure a couple things. One, we're on the right frame when we set a key, and two, we're on the right character set. Okay, so just make sure you have those things set up. And as we look here, we can actually see, here's his pose. He's actually holding something in his hand. He wasn't having his hands at his side. Okay, so I'm going to go to his next move, which is about here. I'm not considering the jiggling a move. So 314 is his next major movement. And what I'm going to do is reset his hands into that position, and I'm going to go back and reset those keys that I had before. Okay, and you can see how we're just kind of focusing on one character in this position. Sometimes you'll need to do both, not at the exact same time, but more often than I'm doing this. Because they're not really touching each other or fighting or something, then I can kind of get away with that. And this is just stage one of the animation process, just going through and setting up these major keys. He actually has his shoulders shrugged a little bit. Okay, so that's a good pose here. Okay, so I'm going to set a key for that one. So I'm going to go back to this one, and I'm just going to go to 314, and then middle click all the way back here at 195, and then hit S to reset that. Okay. So now let me turn my audio on. Let's just see what this sounds like so far.
Looks good to me, sir, but I'd like your opinion. Damn these glasses. Well, it looks good to me, too. Hurry up, son. Time's a-wasting. I'm going to the John. Don't forget to check those tires. Damn these glasses, son. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we've only set about 5 keyframes here, but you can see how we have this basic movement of what's happening in the scene. And that's what the first stage of this is going to be, is going through this entire thing and setting up as far as we want to that time. So my clip actually ends, actually damn those glasses. Okay, so right about there is where my clip is going to end. So I'm actually going to make sure I have my time set to, let's say 360. There we go. Okay. So now I can look at the next set, and I was at 315 before. And that's where he starts to do the damn these glasses. So you see this hand comes down, it goes up, and then it comes down. Okay. The next major pose is not down and up and then down. The next major pose is here. And then I would add in those other things. So I'm going to go to 340 and have him point at his glasses. And it looks like he's a little bit rotated forward. And see a step in there. Let's see. Now he's kind of shuffling, but there's no like actual step. Okay, looks like we're just at a rotational thing here. Maybe there's a little bit of pivoting. Let me just separate that foot a little bit more. And then I'm going to go through the circle here and reset this stuff up. So let's see. These ones here are going to be curled in. The index finger is going to be out. And the thumb is going to be wrapped around the other fingers. And this elbow is going to be tucked in. And this other hand is going to be just holding that thing. And I think I want to rotate his hips or his spine a little bit more, like that. Okay. So that should be good there. So I'm just going to hit a S to set a key. And then he puts his hand down at the end. Okay. Now I'll rewind it again. I'll play it, and I'm just looking at to make sure nothing funky is happening. It's very important we look at these things to see if anything weird is happening with any of the joints as they go. And I think I'll purposefully add something in there if I already didn't. I didn't. Okay. I'll purposely add something in here just so you can see when something funky goes awry. Okay, his hand is essentially in the exact same spot. I'm going to set a key, and then I'm going to rewind it and play it again. So you can see right away in here how his hand doesn't go right to that position. It like twists and gets into there. So what I need to do is I need to go back to this frame, write these values down, negative 140, negative 36, 160. Oops, sorry, not that one. Negative 260, negative 23, 204. Negative 260, 23, 204. That was totally wrong. Negative 260, negative 23, 204. Okay. So there's basically where we were at. And then I can just rotate that forward. Do a little rotation here. Reset my key. And now I should be good getting it into the position I need it to be into. Okay. So I did the whole thing on Steve Martin for the entire sequence. These are his major poses. And if you look at these, let me just isolate some of these other things here so we can get a better idea of what we're looking at. And grab the car, put on a layer called car, and hide it. And I'm going to hide the other guy too so we don't see him. Okay. So if we look at, I'll even turn the curves off so we don't see all those. There we go. So we just see Andy's character. So if you look at the pose here, you get an idea of, even without the car there, that he's leaning on something, he's looking in something. You get an idea that he's doing something very specific in there. Okay. If I go to the next pose, you see here, he looks like he's showing someone something or doing something, and that's what he's supposed to be doing. Okay. And it's a good idea to look at these poses without anything else in the scene and see if they make sense from all degrees. Okay. One thing that's kind of bothering me are both of his knees are pointed this way. I think this knee wants to point forward. So I'm going to turn my curves back on so I can grab this and just pull that knee forward a little bit. Okay. And then I'm just on the Steve Martin layer, so I'll just reset my key. Okay. Then I can go up to the next pose. And that key didn't move with it, so of course I want to move that key with it. Set a key there. And then we have this pose here. So I can adjust that. Okay, here he's just standing, but I want to, again, look at it from all angles and see if that position makes sense, which it does. His neck might be out a little too far. Okay, I can always adjust that there. Okay, I'll go to the next pose. I'm going to pull his head in a little bit more. Set a key. Go back to the next pose. And I think I'm going to adjust this knee. And again, I'm just looking around the entire thing to see if this whole thing makes sense. To see if I like how this pose is working. Okay. Now, obviously, right now he's pointing kind of off to the side. And I believe the gentleman steps off to the side. He's kind of a wiggly guy too. There he is at the beginning, and then he kind of slides over to the other position. Okay, so he actually takes a step into that area. Okay, and if he didn't, I could again just kind of move the other guy around. I could just take him and just slide him over here to start that process off. Okay, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to set up the keyframes on the other guy to do the roughs. And then we'll start on the next stage of this. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the inventor's layer, make sure that I have everything showing, and make sure I set keys on him at his own intervals. So where he is making his major movements. So here's one movement here, there's a start. Grabbing stuff out of his pocket is not one I would consider a major movement. But going here with his hands up to his face, I would consider that a major movement. His glasses falling, I would consider a major movement. And then him putting them back on would be major movements. Okay, and then we have the looking down. He's going to have a little bit more because he's a little bit more animated in this scene than Steve Martin is. Okay, all of his hand waving, not major movements. Okay, I would consider just basically the idea of what he's doing here. So pointing off to the side, that would be a major movement. Glasses falling again, another major movement. Obviously, him holding the glasses there so Steve Martin can damn them would be a major movement. Okay, so I'm going to go with that, and then we'll see you back here in a little bit. Save my stuff as 04. Steve posed.